Hello guys and welcome. Today I'm going to be doing two book related tags, both of them suggested by Heather at Heather Reads. Go and check out her channel. The first one is behind the scenes, which is talking a little bit about what goes into producing my videos and this channel. I do a few different types of videos. I do videos like this about books and writing, and I also do quite a bit about motorbikes and travel in Rwanda. So I'll talk a little bit about how I put those together. And the second one is called 101 Days of Summer, or 101 Days of Summer. And I wasn't sure that I'd have anything to contribute to that because I live on the equator and we don't have 101 days of summer. We have 365 days of summer. So, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do that, but Heather mentioned me and suggested I might like to do it. And as I was reading through the questions, I realised that actually I could answer most of them pretty well. So let's dive into that. But just before we do, I want to let you know that this Friday coming up, the 22nd of August, I'm going to be on Margaret Pinard's channel talking about this book, Emergency Sex, True Stories from a War Zone. And I'm going to be talking about that as part of Agitation August from around 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, 6 p.m. GMT, 7 p.m. Central African time. And yeah, go and check that out because I will be hanging out in the chat live, and I will be answering questions and stuff. So yeah, come along and enjoy that. But let's get into the book tags.
And action.
So it's asking me whether or not I script my videos. It depends what type of video it is. So if it is a reaction video, because I sometimes react to people who are visiting Rwanda for the first time and other travel videos in the East Africa region, if I'm just reacting to something, then no, I don't script it. That is my in the moment reaction to something, and it's just my thoughts coming off my tongue. For videos like this, I don't script it, but I will read the questions beforehand and I might make bullet points next to them. If there's something like a book title or an author name that I don't want to forget, or I don't want to stop the video to go and Google, I will do that beforehand and I will bullet point it so that I know what I'm talking about when I start reading and I can just glance at my notes, but I won't script it. And then there are times when I fully script things. So a lot of the videos where you see me on motorbike rides and I'm driving around on the motorbike and I'm talking about Rwandan history or local sites and tourism attractions, I will usually script those because there's quite specific information that I need to get into there. It probably has to be for a certain length of time. And I will read that script and pre-record it, then add it to the video later. So yeah, I mean, it totally depends what kind of video it is. Do I edit my videos? Absolutely. Everybody does, don't they? I don't think that there are very many people, unless you're a live streamer, I don't think there are very many people who just hit record and, don't edit anything later on. Yeah, I don't tend to edit out the, what does he say there, the hums and haws, or the ums and ahs. Those are discourse markers, and in my last book tag video I went into quite a bit of depth about not weeding out every pause, every discourse marker from my videos because they're quite a natural part of speech. And if you polish something to within an inch of its life, it no longer feels very genuine. The way that we talk naturally, we have a few pauses, we have a few ums, ahs, a few knows, a few so's, and that actually helps conversation flow and it makes speech sound natural. So I don't go in there with the weed cutters and pluck out every single one. But if there's an that kind of lasts for a while and it's going to make the video drag and I could get to the point a bit quicker, then that will disappear. Absolutely, I have been back through and chopped and changed things if I've said something that was inaccurate, and during the editing process I've suddenly gone, oh, whoops, I shouldn't have said that, or I should have worded that differently, then I will go back. Sometimes, if I'm in the flow and I'm just chatting away to the camera and I say something and I'm not certain about it, but I think it could be one of two things, I'll record it twice. I'll just say, you could fit 20 elephants into a football stadium, or, you know, you could fit 400 elephants into a football stadium, and then I'll just pick the correct one in the edit. Everybody does tricks like that. Everybody, you know, everybody does that. Sometimes I'll leave in the trip over the tongue mistakes, because every now and again they're quite funny. So if I think it's funny, I'll probably leave it in. But if it just takes up time, gone. Yes, I have deleted entire posts before. Videos are a bit like writing an email. You know, you don't fully register what you've written until you hit the send button. It's the same with videos. You don't always catch your mistakes until you've uploaded them. And it's always after that point that you suddenly realize that you've made a really inaccurate statement, or you've said something that could be widely misunderstood, or something that you didn't really believe, but you were just spitballing and something came out and you forgot to take it out. Again, it's akin to writing. Like, you can write a novel and you can read it over and over and over and over and over again on a screen, but it's only when you've got the hard copy in front of you that you notice certain things like word spacing or misspellings. So I often think to look at something in different formats, printed, or, you know, listening to it text to speech or on a screen, reading it in different sizes also helps. So with a video, you're editing it and it's usually a little box in the editing program that you're looking at, but then you might watch it back on VLC player and it will be the whole screen, and then you'll upload it and you'll see it in the size that most people will be watching it, and then you'll watch it on your phone and then you'll see it again in the size that most other people are watching, and every now and again that will point out something that you've missed. And sometimes you get hung up on the stupidest things. Sometimes it isn't the big mistakes that really annoy you. Like, there's this one process in I use DaVinci Studio to edit. There's a brilliant stabilization app, so you know, you might have made a bit of a camera wobble. It happens especially when you zoom in on something. The closer you get to an object with zoom, the more wobbly the camera tends to appear, and you can hit this app and it will just stabilize it so it looks good. But if during the editing process you decide that actually you want a bit longer on that clip, so you extend the length of the clip, you have to go back through and reset the stabilization, because if you don't, you'll get to the original point and then it will sort of change the size of it, the ratio of it, and it'll jerk. And it's a very, very, very subtle thing that happens. But once you know, and you see it, it's like this glaring, obvious crinkle in your otherwise beautifully ironed video, and I will sometimes go back just to fix a video just for that. Nobody else in the world cares. Nobody else is watching this or cares, but I see it and I care, and it annoys me. So yeah. I think everybody has their little Achilles heel, their little thing that drives them up the wall, and that they would sacrifice an entire upload for to re-upload it better. Yeah. So yeah, are there things that are too personal or too controversial? Of course there are. There are for everybody. So obviously the things that are too personal, I'm not going to go into here because they're too personal. Everybody does, and I think that's perfectly fine and normal. So there are a lot of stories that I tell people about. You know, there's a lot of things that I do share, but I'm comfortable about sharing what I share. Sometimes I overshare, but I'm comfortable with that. If there's something I'm not comfortable with, then I'm not going to talk about it. I do tend to avoid politics a bit. You know, I live in a region of the world where it's not common to talk about politics in public. So, you know, I'm a bit careful about that. And often when I'm doing sort of interviews, I prefer things to be pre-recorded because, I mean, we have some technical issues here, like the electricity does go down quite a lot, but also, you know, I like to feel free to just say what I'm thinking. I do say what I'm thinking. It's like I see it, I say it, you know, and to spitball. And if you're in the flow of conversation with somebody, you don't want to kind of freeze up that free flow because you're wondering whether or not you're saying the right thing. So, you know, I prefer just to chat. And then if it comes to the end of something, I think, you know what, that could be really badly misunderstood, or, you know, I probably shouldn't have said that, or even I said something, I'm not sure that I really believe it. Then I might ask to edit. But usually I'll get to the end of an interview. The past two that I've done, I get to the end of it and there's nothing in there that I feel I want changed or removed, so that's fine. But if I suddenly went off on a tangent about world politics or religion or something that the interview was not really specifically about, but I just meandered off the road, I might reserve the right to just trim that bit back. And also I think that's quite a natural feeling for writers, because as a writer, as an author, I gravitate towards the written word because you can edit it. You can write down everything you're thinking. You can just like info dump onto a page, and then you go back later and you trim it and you figure out what you do think through what you're writing. And it's similar with saying things. Is sometimes you're figuring out what you're thinking through what you're saying. And as with writing, it's nice to hit the pause button and to go back and say, well, is that really what I thought? Is that really what I meant? And have that moment to reflect on that. Do I add graphics, music, lighting to my videos? Yes. Let's take that one at a time. Graphics. So yeah, you know, show what you're saying is usually a good tenet when you're making videos. Don't just describe, but show what you're describing. We call that B-roll footage. So A-roll is me here now talking to you, but say that I'm talking about an orange and I show an orange to illustrate my point in case you don't know what an orange looks like. That will be my B-roll footage. Or if I go somewhere, say like Githsemane, and I'm telling you about how nice the beach is there, I'm going to show you some of the beach so that you know how nice it is as well. And again, that's B-roll footage. I think most people add that to their videos. Not everybody, but a lot of people, especially in travel, do that. Sometimes if I've got a bit of time and I'm feeling creative, then I will create a graphic. A while ago, I think I was talking about a phone holder on my motorbike that died, and I created a little graphic to illustrate that because it was funny. I have 3 free places that I use continuously. One is called Clip Art Max, which is just clip art graphics. If you ever see the little gremlin appear, that's where I got that. And the 2 photo places tend to be Free Pics, which does a whole load of vectors and graphics and photographs, and the other one is Pexels. And also Wikipedia Commons. If you type Wikipedia Commons media or photos, they have a massive store that you can use, and most of those just require attribution. Some of them don't require attribution at all, they're just free to use. My lighting, generally no. At the moment I'm sitting here talking to my camera with the curtains slightly open. If it's nighttime, I have a webcam which has a little light on it, and it has different settings, so low, medium and high, and that can be quite useful for adding a bit of extra lighting. But also I tend to film these kind of videos on a Google Pixel phone, and that's got a special little feature that puts a little extra lighting on me if I want to use that. So I don't actually need an additional light. I can just hit that and it brightens everything up a bit. But when I'm out and about just filming on my bike and things, I don't tend to take any extra lighting, and that's why you see a lot more of the lines on my face. Talking about which is I do tend to use the face refinement feature on DaVinci Studio, just because I don't sleep very well at the moment. I might do a video about that, but I am starting to get some dark circles under my eyes and it bothers me a bit. And also because it's quite warm here, it's quite, you know, humid, I get a bit shiny and I try to reduce that. It's not that I'm overly vain, but it's just I don't want to look back at these videos in a year or two and think, oh, I don't look very, very okay there, you know. I want them to be enduring videos that are pleasant to look at. So it's not a huge difference, but this is me with my face filter on, and this is me without it. And, you know, I don't think it's a huge difference, but it just makes everything look a little bit nicer without me having to put makeup on. So what I do tend to do is I do tend to put a bit of eyeliner on now and then, but you know, with the face filter, I can roll out of bed. I don't have to put any makeup on. And, you know, I don't look too shabby. You know, I look like I made a little bit of effort even when I haven't, which is, you know, everybody's dream. I'm not too proud to admit that I do use that every now and again, just because, you know, I feel better about myself when I do, which is probably not the right or the correct answer to give, but it's truthful. For music, I do use a lot of music in some of my videos, especially, again, the tourism ones. I use Epidemic Sound, which is fantastic. It is pricey. It's about £100 or $120 a year. But for that, you've got unlimited downloads of every genre of music you can think of. And I think it really helps. It keeps people engaged. And it gives a bit of atmosphere to some of my endeavours. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is my Insta360 camera, which is a special type of camera that allows you to film in all directions at the same time. Again, this is what I use when I'm out on my motorbike. Almost every motorbike ride is filmed with this. And also when I'm out doing touristy things and I just want a few cool shots, it's got a great feature that does the globe. So whenever you see the globe shot, that will always be an Insta360 camera shot. Target number of posts each week. I try to post between 3 to 5 days usually. So it's usually on average about every 4 days, I think, which is quite a lot. It's a lot of work. But I've been trying to, you know, build up the audience. And also because I sometimes make a lot of videos that I don't think appeal to a wide group of people, but I enjoy making them. Like, I can talk for half an hour about granola, you know. Nobody going to be watching that, but I enjoy making it. And as I got the footage anyway, I thought, well, why not throw it out there? But I know that those kind of videos are going to bomb pretty hard with the algorithm. So usually if I've got a video that's going to bomb, I'll make sure that within about 3 days I've uploaded something that's probably got a bit of a wider appeal, just so that I don't start crashing out. But if I've got a video that I upload and I know it's doing well, or it suddenly starts doing really well, like the one about culture shock between Rwanda and Kenya, that contrast video, that did pretty good. It got like a couple of thousand views pretty quickly. So I will let that run for a bit longer before I release another video. When I see that the viewership and the views start to drop off, then I'll go for another video. Are there certain themes that I tend to contribute to most? I'm starting to do a bit more book tag, a little bit more author tube stuff, a bit more about writing. Originally, this entire channel was about writing, and then I moved more and more towards tourism and Rwanda because that's what people are really interested in, and that's where the majority of my audience comes from. But I do still contribute a bit to book tags and things like I'm doing now. I do constantly upload stuff with the hashtags Rwanda, Kigali. Rwanda vlog is something that apparently a lot of people search online, and a lot of people come to my site for that. So anything to do with tourism or travel information in Rwanda, I tend to cover quite a lot. And I have a longer running episodic playlist here where I'm going back through an old diary that I kept for 2 years between 2007 and 2009 when I very first came to Rwanda as a VSO volunteer. So that's my own playlist, but I contribute to that once, sometimes twice a month. How important is the subscriber count? Well, a little bit, if I'm being honest. I don't think anybody goes into YouTube thinking, I don't want anybody to watch this. You know, that's not why you do it. Caring about your subs count kind of means that you care about the content you're creating and your channel. You want it to grow. You want it to be seen by more people. An analogy, though, a bit like writing is even if people weren't reading it, you'd probably still do it. You know, it's a compulsion to create things. And they're not always good, and they're not always interesting, and they're not always brilliant, but in fact they're very rarely brilliant, but you know, it's an enjoyment. You do it because you do it. What else would you be doing? So you know, you do that. But I was watching a video the other day which made a very good point. It's not really the subscriber count that counts, it's the viewers and the retention. So viewers are the active number of people who are actually clicking on your video and watching it, and the retention is how long are they watching it for. Subscriber count, I mean, I do it. You click subscribe, you subscribe to a channel, but then you might never really go back and watch anything, or you might just even leave YouTube and not come back. So you can have a lot of dead subscribers in your count. As long as the viewership's going up, I'm happy. There have been a couple of instances where, I don't know, I can't even remember what the examples were, but I might have posted something and I might have lost 2 or 3 subscribers in a day. And it's like, oh, you know, maybe what I was posting was not on the money. Maybe that's not the kind of content I should do again. Maybe, you know, I need to readdress how I presented that. So it can be an interesting gauge of whether or not a video or whether or not your channel is going in the right direction. Yeah, so I mean, of course I've got one eye on it. Do I always respond to things I'm tagged in? Not always. Sometimes if I think it's relevant and I have something to contribute, then yes. But sometimes people just tag you in on videos they think you like, or, you know, brief passing mentions that don't require any further input. So sometimes not. Do I reply to comments and do I give lengthy or brief responses? I do tend to respond to most comments, not all obviously, but if it's a specific question and I know the answer to it, or I think I can be helpful, then yeah, absolutely. YouTube is a community. And also, I grew up in the early days of the internet where, you know, everybody was in forums, and forums were about long, detailed, lengthy replies and sharing information and discussions and talking about ideas and thoughts and opinions. So I grew up in the era of lengthy responses, and, you know, I do tend to reply at length sometimes to questions. I'm starting to realise that I don't think that's what people always want when they're watching a YouTube channel. I think sometimes people just like to drop a comment and just leave it at that, or ask a question and get like the TLDR sort of quick brief response. So I'm trying to get used to more succinct responses. I do have a little bit at the bottom of every video, but I don't know how many people actually read video info. I mean, I don't read video info on everything, but it does actually ask people to leave a comment rather than to try to contact me directly. You know, if somebody leaves a comment on your video, then you can respond to that, and your response, if it's helpful, will help anybody else in the comments section. So it's helping multiple people by answering one question. Whereas I do get a lot of people who DM me, and, you know, I understand why they do it, but I can't spend my day replying to like 5 or 6 different questions individually and personally, because what else would I get to do with my day at that point? But yeah, it's really difficult to navigate, you know, especially when you haven't done anything like this before. As you're learning where boundaries are, and how to build a healthy community. It's an interesting social experiment that we're all in together. Have I ever blocked anybody? Yes, I have. I'm kind of lucky because at this stage, my channel is quite small, and so I can read through comments and I can sometimes keep on top of what people are saying. Not always. Some of them that were a bit hate speechy, shall we say, those I will take off. My space is where I come to chill out, relax, talk about things I'm interested in, and connect with other people who are interested in the same things, and, you know, build that community. Hi guys, and welcome back to a much sweatier and slightly insect bitten part 2 of book tags. Yeah, so after I finished the first one, we had a power cut and it went down for a while. So I took the opportunity to run around like a blue arse fly and sweep and mop the floors and do a bit of housework. And I'm back! And so is the power, thankfully. So let's dive into it. Honestly, this is why I need face filter. So this is 101 Days of Summer by the Reading Room 1972. Again, shared by Heather. And as I mentioned, it's an interesting one for me because on the equator, we don't really have summer and winter. Our seasons are not hot and cold, they're more sort of wet and dry. It does get a little chilly for locals in the wet season, but it never really goes below 17 degrees, so you can't really call it winter. If you're coming from somewhere that has a true winter, you will never feel that cold here, so... Okay, so if I was going to a barbecue, which author would I want to be there? What announcement would I hope that they would make? And what would I bring to the barbecue? So it's a two-parter. I don't tend to have favourite authors, apart from there's one or two that stand out, but generally it's the book that I remember, and then it's the author by association with the book. So one of my favourite books in the past 10 years has been The Binding by Bridget Collins. I would like her to be there, and the announcement I would like her to make is that there will be a stage adaptation, because I would love to go and see that. And then what would I bring? I would bring zingalo, which is sort of the national delicacy of Rwanda, and I doubt anybody else would have brought it. Zingalo is basically, it's usually sort of goat intestine, and it's on a skewer, perfect for barbecuing, national delicacy. Okay, so real life setting from a recent or not so recent book that I would like to take a road trip to. That's difficult for me because there are so many places I'd like to go. But one that popped to mind from both an old book and a slightly more recent one is Nizhny Novgorod. So it's a bit of a funny one, this. It's in Russia. And the reason that I first heard about it is because one of my novels, one of my better novels, is called Those Rosy Hours at Mazandaran. And it's about Iran, pre-revolution, mid-1800s, when the Shah was at the height of his power. And the reason that I wrote that book is it's sort of a sequel to Phantom of the Opera, because... in the original, Gaston Leroux wrote about a sultan's daughter, the Sultana, who was kind of evil. And her and Eric, the Phantom, kind of teamed up to do awful things to people. And as a horror writer, that was quite an attractive concept. So I went into that in Those Rosy Hours at Mazandaran. And whilst researching, I used Gaston Leroux's Phantom of the Opera as my Bible whilst researching, because I always feel that if you're going to do a prequel or a sequel to something, you've got to kind of keep it true to the original as much as artistically possible, because, you know, it adds something to people who love the original to come to a new version and go, oh, I recognise that. Oh, I know that, you know. And in the original, the Phantom of the Opera, or Eric as he was called, originated in Rouen and ended up in a travelling circus in Nizhny Novgorod. So let me just find that. Eric was born in a small town not far from Rouen. He was the son of a master mason. He ran away at an early age from his father's house, where his ugliness was a subject of horror and terror to his parents. For a time, he frequented the fairs, where a showman exhibited him as the living corpse. He seemed to have crossed the whole of Europe from fair to fair, and to have completed his strange education as an artist and magician at the very fountainhead of art and magic, among the gypsies. a period of Eric's life remained quite obscure. He was seen at the fair of Nizhny Novgorod, where he displayed himself in all his hideous glory. So that was really the first mention of it for me, and I bring it in at the very, very beginning of my telling of the Sultana's story, where, you know, he's first found in the fairs of Nizhny Novgorod and makes his way down into Persia. And then a few years later, I was reading a biography of Gentleman Jack, so Anne Lister. Actually, the full title of the book is quite fun. Let me just... Gentleman Jack, a biography of Anne Lister, Regency landowner, seducer and secret diarist by Angela Stidell. So Anne Lister was an extremely famous lesbian in the UK who was also a secret diarist, and she kept all of her diaries about the women she slept with and the people that she'd met and the places she'd been, and she kept it all in code in a secret sort of place in her home. So when her diaries were discovered, it then took years for people to decode them and to actually read about what life was like in those days for somebody who was not gender normative. And it was really, really interesting, the biography. But in part of it, she stuffs her very, very long-suffering partner into a stagecoach, into a carriage, and drives across Russia and ends up in Nizhny Novgorod again. So it's one of these places that, when I first heard the name, sounded so sort of obscure and unknown, but then keeps cropping up in these books that I read. And the more that I learnt about it, the more I realised it was actually a really big centre of trade and culture at the time. So I have recently discovered a midlife love of motorbikes, and I would like to take a motorbike road trip from, the UK all the way across to Nizhny Novgorod. But for that, I would need heated gloves and heated jackets, and I would need the full gear and a bike with a lot of storage. But I think that would be kind of good fun. So I haven't been camping in quite a while. The last time I went camping was a couple of years ago. I went to Akagera National Park here and camped by Lake Shikani, and that was good fun. An elephant wandered into the camp and we all had to run into the toilet block where we waited for it to leave, because elephants can be pretty dangerous. So growing up, my dad used to take me camping a bit, but I didn't really read back then very much when I was camping, because, you know, there was cycling and walking and other things to do. And then in my teenage years, I went to some pagan camps because, you know, I was pagan, and there were some beautiful camps like the Ellabang camp in the New Forest. The New Forest in England is kind of an important place for pagans in the UK. And you'd go there and it would be wonderful because you'd have all of the different branches, the different parts of paganism, the different traditions, and everybody would hold sort of rituals in their tradition, and you could just go to different ones and experience different people's traditions, and that was really nice. But again, it was so involved and involving that I didn't take anything to read. I do find as I'm getting older, I appreciate amenities a little bit more, a bit of comfort. Like the last one that I went to, I think I tried to go camping on Lake Chihoha, and the amenities were so questionable that I actually ran away. I ran away and I went to a hotel. I'm not proud of myself. When I was in my early 20s, mid-20s, early 20s, I travelled around Australia with a friend, and we spent a good couple of months living in a tent in a campsite, and every morning we'd get up and throw ourselves into the swimming pool. It was a campsite in Fremantle in Western Australia, and yeah, it was really lovely to wake up every morning and just have a swimming pool. And when I was living in that campsite, I read a lot. My friend read a lot as well. You know, we didn't really have radio, we didn't really have anything else, television or anything, but there was a superb second-hand bookshop, or I think it was a second-hand bookstall in Fremantle at the time, and each week we'd go in and we'd exchange our books and we'd come back and we'd just sit in the tent and we would read. So it was like a little library tent for a long time. I read some obscure obscure titles there that I don't think I would ever read again or have found if I hadn't been kind of a little bit desperate. There was one there about the Jonestown Massacre that I read, and I think as well that was when we discovered The Peculiar Memories of Thomas Penman, which is just a fascinating book, absolutely worth reading if you come across it. Written by the guy who wrote With Nail and I. Just an amazingly strange and interesting coming of age story. So when camping at that point, I read continuously. I feel like I did a lot of camping, but I don't do a lot of camping anymore. Nowadays, if I do go camping or something like that, then I am likely to read a lot less. Just because, you know, there are people to talk to and things to do and things to go and look at and... If I went to a booktube festival and I had to cosplay, who would I go as? The first one that came to my mind was Dr. Diablerie from Differently Morphous by Yahtzee Croshaw, because he's like the archetypal villain. It's like the sort of cloak kind of moving sideways down the hallway in your big black cloak, and you know, I think that could be kind of fun, top hat. But then I thought about it some more. I think I'd probably go as the character from something like Tipping the Velvet, you know, because I was just watching Andy talking about Sarah Waters on his channel, and it kind of reminded me how much fun the musical era was. So the thing that I really liked from the BBC adaptation was when Keely Hawes, who was playing Kitty Butler, you know, one minute she's in the top and tails, like perfect drag king, beautiful. And then she'll step behind the screen and change into this full floaty Victorian dress and corset. And I like that shape-shifting aspect, where the costume can kind of be changed depending on your mood. So I don't know, for me, I do not wear dresses and skirts very often, if ever, but if I was going to wear a skirt, I would wear the full skirt, like the full-on kind of corset and skirt flouncy kind of. I love that kind of aesthetic, so I'd love to do something a bit steampunk, a bit like that, but I'd probably go in the suit and the top hat and tails, because I quite like that as well. Something simple and mundane that I can get through summer without, well, as I say, it is always summer here, and two things that I could never live without is water and sunscreen. So water, you dehydrate so quickly, and often you don't realise till it's too late. And sunscreen is, you know, if I'm going out for the day, if I'm on my bike, if I'm doing anything in the sun, I need it because I'm quite pale and I burn like that. So I have to protect myself. I don't always remember, and when I forget, I know about it really quickly. Creepy stories around a campfire. I'm going to be really obvious here. I'm just going to say Stephen King. And the reason is because of the way that the question is phrased. Yeah, you would want to hear their scariest story. So like loads of authors can tell scary stories. I've read a lot of Stephen King. He's got some creepy stuff going on there, but I want to hear the creepiest story he's got, the scariest story he's got, because the scariest story that somebody like Stephen King's got has got to be pretty scary. I mean, I've read Apt Pupil, and that was... So, you know, he's got to have some tricks up his sleeve that he hasn't published yet, or maybe can't publish. Okay, penultimate question. This is quite a complicated one. So... bittersweet endings or lasting impacts? I will go with lasting impacts because I think that bittersweet endings they're dangerous because they trap you in the past, you know? That's all about regrets and might have beens. And for as long as you're trapped thinking about that, you're not really moving forward. Whereas sort of, you know, big impacts and lasting impacts, that kind of slingshots you into the future, into a new adventure, onto a new path, you know. So I think for me, lasting impact is more of a satisfying story. And then it asks you about age and whether or not it matters the age of the characters. I don't think so much. I mean, you're more likely to get a lasting impact, immediate kind of big bang love affair in stories about younger characters, a more sort of bittersweet sort of memories and regrets story about older characters. But for me, I think the most interesting characters are the ones that defy expectation. So even in real life, you can meet a 20-year-old who seems like they've been around forever, and you can meet, you know, an older person in their 60s and 70s who is still giggling like a child and playing practical pranks and jokes. So, you know, I think aging is a very personal experience, and so I don't think that you can just trap people into those categories. So I remember growing up that there was a TV series called Waiting for God with Stephanie Cole and the actor, and it was all about two people who fell in love in an old people's home. So, you know, you can find love for the first time in your 80s and 90s, or you can be completely jaded and burnt out by the time you're 30. So I think it's all just such a very individual perspective, you know. A book that makes me nostalgic for summer? No. Like Heather, I can't think of one. And again, you know, I don't really experience summer as an individual entity anymore. It's not something that kind of stands out to me as a specific season. And of course, growing up, like Heather, I struggle to remember when I read something. I know that I've read something, but I struggle to remember when or to really associate it with something. Although music and songs, I tend to remember more clearly where I was when I heard them. So there are songs that I remember from my childhood that were just summer bangers, you know. They remind me of sunshine and summer and country beer gardens and things like that. But not so much with books. Out of curiosity, I did go back through my old blog and I looked for books to do with summer, and I found a quote that I thought was quite sweet. So years ago, I was staying in a house on the German-Polish border for a writing retreat. I was trying to get some writing done, and my next door neighbour was this lovely girl, and she helped me out so much, because what I didn't realise is, you know, after the Berlin Wall came down, West Germany was speaking English a lot already, but East Germany, not so much. The very few people spoke English. And even when I was staying there, it was like that. So you'd be driving across Europe and you go through West Germany and everybody spoke English. You go into East Germany, nobody spoke English. And then you come out in Poland and again, everybody spoke English. So it was really, really weird. But I didn't think about that when I drove over there. So I was staying in this tiny little village where nobody spoke any English, and my German is not even basic. The only phrase I remember from school is "Ich mochte ein Kartoffel mit Käse, bitte." And that doesn't get you very far. So this lovely, lovely girl who was living next door, she acted as my interpreter. And her favourite book was Ronia, the Robber's Daughter, which was written by Astrid Lindgren, who wrote the Pippi Longstocking stories. And years later, this lovely, lovely girl who'd helped me out so much, she had a daughter and she named her Ronia. And in my blog review of the book, I found something very pertinent to summer. So I'm going to end this by reading that, and I shall see you in the next one.
Truly, there was nothing Ronia wanted to know more. She had wondered a lot why Burke was not worrying at all about winter. "It is summer now, sister mine," he would say, as calmly as if winter would never come. "We have only this summer, you and I," said Burke. "And the way things are going with me now, I don't mind very much about living, unless you are with me. And when winter comes, you won't be with me." Summer would not last forever. He knew it, and Ronia knew it. But now they began to live as if it would, and as far as possible they pushed away all painful thoughts of winter. They wanted to make the most of every hour, from dawn to dusk and night time, and draw the sweetness from it. The days could come and go. They were living in a summer enchantment and would not be disturbed. They had just a little time left.